Jacob.
Thanks, Brad.
How are you? Oh, you'll be muted, Jacob. When you come on, you'll be muted first.
Yes, I have figured that out. I think I'm all good now.
Good. Thanks for coming on the show, Jacob. The day's really getting away from me. I can't believe it's 1:30 already. I am.
That's good. You got 24 hours, so I'm hoping it's getting away from you.
Well, I was just about to say, I've only done some dry brushing on my Minas Tirith warriors, but I'm pretty sure I could.
That's 80% of the job, right?
Yeah. They're pretty much done. So I got all in the time in the world to sit back and eat this wonderful lunch that my wife brought me in. Jacob runs, for those who are watching from home or here in the stream as well, who don't know, Jacob runs Conquest Creations, a online store here in Australia selling a whole bunch of cool hobby products and 3D printed miniatures, which we'll talk about later on in the stream in the schedule. I think there's a area for talking about 3D printing and how that's changing the industry. But I know Jacob primarily from his Conquest Creations YouTube channel, which does some awesome MESBG content, and I asked Jacob to come on and have a bit of a chat. I thought that you might be painting something, Jacob, because you're quite a prolific commission painter as well.
Yes, I was hoping to, but the complexity of having a computer at my desk doesn't work out too well for me. But I can show you some of the things I've been working on recently.
Look, let me just change my view for a second. All right?
I was going to say, Viv, why don't you show him what you're working with? It's not great.
That is the absolute dream.
There's my painting station over there, Jacob. But to manage this stream, I'm sort of painting on like this tiny little corner here. But I am just dry brushing some Minas Tirith warriors. It's not a difficult job.
Makeup, brush, wash. You're done, mate. You're good.
So what have you been working on lately, Jacob?
Well, I recently finished off nearly finished off my commission backlog, which got a little bit longer than I think I should have let it get. So that's a good feeling to have that all done. Recently finished off a big Easterling and Minas Tirith combination. And then I've been painting stuff for product photography recently. So all the miniatures that I sell, most of them at the moment are just pictures of the unpainted miniatures, but that needs to change. So I've been working on slowly getting through my pretty big range of miniatures now to get them painted and put up on the website.
You've got a lot of stuff on there, and that is one of the things that can be difficult with 3D printed miniatures. You see them all the time now everywhere. That photographs of a 3D printed miniature can really disguise the detail that some of these figures have, and that you don't see that until you get some paint on it and you really start to see what's there.
Yeah, 100%. I've noticed that as well. Mainly because I'm not the most experienced photographer, so I found that a lot of the details on just the plain gray are pretty washed out. So it's really important to get paint on them so that potential customers can see what they actually look like instead of a washed out picture.
Yeah. I'm just going to go grab some more figures. Jacob, you obviously here in Melbourne as well, suffering from our lockdowns and the limited opportunities to socialise and interact with people. One of the big things on your channel is on the Conquest Creations YouTube channel is the battle reports that you do with people. Obviously, given that we're locked down, we can't do a lot of that. How have you been coping with that?
Well, so far it's been okay because before the lockdown, I managed to have 5 filmed, and I was planning on releasing them on a fortnightly schedule, which has been going well. We're sticking to that. The problem is I've now released 4 out of the 5 filmed videos, and we obviously can't film more. So I've got 1 more. So at the moment, it's I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to fill that space with, and I've decided that instead of taking a break, because I find that really you lose momentum and you lose potential people who are interested in. I'm going to pivot from doing some battle reports into doing painting project videos. So I find there's a lot of videos about how to paint this, how to paint that. That's great if you want to paint that specific thing, but the idea is making it a show where someone can kind of go through the whole process of doing a project start to finish with me and talk about the lore behind the miniatures, why I painted them that way, how I want to use them in game. Try to make it as interesting as possible.
Yeah, is that something that I watched recently a video that you did with a couple of other people where they were talking about tactics and strategies in the maybe it was Articon in the UK.
Yes, exactly.
I found that really interesting. And is that is that something that you find helpful or useful to keep you engaged in the game and in the hobby and with the, your social people, catching up with people and talking about those sorts of things, or getting involved in these sorts of painting projects?
Yeah, I really like talking to people about the game in general, overall. I find when we're making a video about it, like that most recent Articon one, that it kind of changes the conversation from just mates talking to, okay, we're making a video and I need to talk about this, and okay, we've talked long enough about that. A viewer might get bored, so let's move on.
You start getting wrapped up in the content creation aspects of those discussions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's no problem with that, because I want to have the best quality content, but there's a divide between what should be content and what should just be hanging out with mates.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I prefer. I love just, getting on a painting chat and hanging out with mates and talking about all that stuff, but not needing to worry about, is this something that's going to be marketable? Because that's not what it's about for a lot of things.
Yeah. This kind of ties into what we were discussing earlier with Peter Overton, who was on from Demented Games. Was that for me, I find it very difficult to draw a division between, my hobby and Knights of Dice and the work that I'm doing at home, or videos that I want to film for YouTube. It can be very challenging, which is why just having those specific sessions that I've had with Ed and Ara from Manapress and, a few other people, just sitting down and painting and, just trying to, enjoy that experience for, it's, what it is, just, sitting down painting the figures.
Yeah. And I'm very busy at the moment. So whenever something is going to be, like business related, it needs to be done properly for me. So I know if I want to paint some miniatures and just relax at night, well, I'm not going to screw that up by putting a camera on, because it's still my hobby that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put out things that are a bit that I don't really want to do. Because if I don't want to do it, if I don't want to make videos, and if it's turning into a chore, well, then I'm doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's going to be forced, and then that's going to come across to the people who are watching, and
not even that. The whole idea with Conquest Creations is that it's a business where hopefully I can make money and support myself doing something that I really, really enjoy. And if I'm not enjoying it, there's a lot easier ways to make money.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. You need to be passionate and excited about what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I get people every now and then, sending me messages on YouTube saying, I want to start a channel and all that sort of stuff. I think there's a perception out there that, people on YouTube, you've got a fairly, reasonable following, Jacob, that people out there on YouTube are, rolling around in, coin and money. But
Scrooge McDuck, gold pool style.
Yeah. Whilst
that's Simon Whistler, if anybody knows who that is.
Whilst we all want to make some coin from our videos that we're doing, is producing the battle reports something specifically? Was it an intention for you to specifically produce battle reports for YouTube, or did you find it an extension of your hobby that would allow you to engage with a wider audience that that's not there in your living room, so to speak? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I see what you're asking. It was always my intention from the outset to make battle reports. A big thing for me is I don't look at my YouTube channel as part of my hobby. Because when I started Conquest Creations, the purpose of it was to be a business, not to be me making hobby videos, because video production isn't a hobby of mine. So it needed to accompany something else. So all the videos that I make, they are essentially ads for the products that I sell.
Sure.
And they happen to be ads that I really, really enjoy making, and I would personally be really interested in watching myself. But that's the motivation behind it.
Sure.
And yeah, so it's their purpose from my perspective is to get people to know about my products, and then obviously do that in the best way possible. I think is to make the best video possible that is appealing to people who might be interested in my products.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Got to show them. You enjoying it, and that gets them pretty excited to be along on that.
Yeah,
journey.
exactly. I think a big part of that as well is that there's a lot of YouTube videos where the quality's decent, but it's not like they're world-class editors. But the reason that they have millions of subscribers is because their personality and because people enjoy being around them. So one of the podcasts that I listen to is a painting podcast, but honestly, I don't care about any of the topics. I just care that they're really, really engaging and fun people to listen to.
It's the people that you're watching or listening to that really make the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I hear people talk about all the time, sound is the most important factor either for a podcast or for video. Making sure that you can be heard clearly, and if you've got engaging presenters. This is why I love Brad, who was just on before you, from Cast Ice. If they're an interesting person to listen to, then it makes it very easy to come back and say, yeah, actually, I'm going to tune in next week and see what he's got to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. So there was actually a topic that I wanted to come on and talk about on this.
What was that?
Go for it.
I wanted to talk about why the miniature wargaming hobby is just the best hobby. So I've got a lot here. I've got three key things. So first reason, it's artistic, and you get something tangible. So painting our miniatures is art. You're working on long-term projects, and painting an army, it's not just you sit down and do it. It's something that you work on over months. So there's a degree of work ethic involved in it as well. So first one, artistic, and you get a physical, tangible thing out of it. Second one, you get the strategy and the thinking of actually playing the game. So you can think now, sit down.
That's a stretch for some of us, Jacob.
Sorry.
Might be, yeah. I've played against Viv before, and I don't know if he plays that part of the hobby.
he and I usually throw things at each other until one of us walks away the winner.
Just push things forward and go that way, and the dice roll will tell me if it was a good move or not.
And then I think the final, most relevant reason why this is the best hobby is the people you meet through it. I've got so many close friends that I would have met if I hadn't started out by sitting down and painting miniatures and then wanting to use them in a game and playing the game and then meeting people through it. So 3 reasons, best hobby.
Dead right.
I can't agree more with you on that last one. The friendships that get made. There's a few people here in the chat that I've seen pop up who, are friends with some of the people that they know because they met through gaming. I had, I think Ben Methrel's also here in the chat. He used to come to my old store, Battle Bunker, which was in Northcote, which I ran, over a decade ago. And he came up to the Knights of Dice studio a couple of months ago before this lockdown. And, said, I'm going to catch up with another guy, Sam. And he's like, do you remember Sam? I was like, yeah. And I said, are you guys still seeing each other? They used to play games, at the Battle Bunker a decade ago. He's like, yeah. I still catch up with this person. I still catch up with that person. And, these friendships that have formed, and you're a decade old now, have been formed over, the hobby. Playing games and...
Well, the only reason I know Nick Thorne is because he worked at Games Workshop in Carindale in Brisbane, and I'd just been convinced to get back into Warhammer by someone I worked with. And Nick, were you actually working there, or were you just
I was
doing painting for them?
No, I was a casual at that point.
That's right. And he brought in this stuff. He brought in this insanely well-painted swooping Hawk X-Arch. And I went, the hell is this? Who are you? What's going on? And we hit it off, and we've been mates ever since. And that was, oh, dear Lord, that was 17 years ago.
More, I think.
No, I was 18.
I was still living at home then.
I was 18, so it has to be...
So that would have been 2004. 2004, something like that.
The 21st next week, isn't it, Edwin?
That's about 17 years. Jeez.
What was that, JP?
So your 21st is next week, isn't it, mate?
Yeah. I like how I've gone from you're almost 30 to now I'm only 20. This is going well.
It's the Benjamin Button episode.
Yeah, that's right.
And then Topher, who's on the stream as well, he was hosting Infinity Day, and I wasn't invited because we didn't know each other at that point. And I dropped off a mate of ours, Paul Nichols, and I dropped him off. And Paul went, "Oh, just come in and say hi. You'll know some of the guys." I went, "Oh, it's not my house. Like, do you think the dude will mind?" It's like, "No. Topher's really chill guy. It'll be fine." And I walked in. I stayed there for like 4 or 5 hours, didn't I, Toph? We were just
did.
talking shit to each other the
I was,
whole
I was meant to
time.
be organising the tournament instead. I was just out the front of my porch talking to Ed.
It was great. And then we've been mates ever since. And, you know, it's just honestly, the people in this hobby are just fantastic. You know, I met Viv at CanCon one year because he was selling all of his Chinese buildings for the Chinatown range for cheap because they'd fallen off the. I'm not falling off the back of a truck, sorry. You produced them. But they got really wet. And so there was some water damage and stuff. And I bought a whole bunch of stuff and then met you and Scott, who's coming on later. Scott Reed's a fantastic guy as well. And these are friendships that, you know, this isn't just gaming for me. Yeah, we catch up and play games, but it's gone much beyond, you know, well beyond that now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is the most important of all those reasons, I think.
Yeah, completely agree.
They're often
Don't be
really
wrong. I love
long-lasting
painting.
friendships as well.
What was that?
Yeah,
Sorry,
and I
Tim?
think
They're often the long-lasting friendships where, you know, you're mentioning Ben Mestrel, and I haven't seen him in years, but you know, we played at some tournaments over in rural South Australia. I don't know if we played a tournament. I can't remember much from that weekend, but yeah, sort of person that I would love to catch up with, and I'm sure it'd be like, you know, time hasn't even passed.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's not just a hobby that you have to do with friends. Like it's great doing it with friends, but it's also great through lockdown where you can't see people that you can still do the hobby because you can still paint just by yourself.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I love is and you know, I touched on this briefly when I spoke to Sonia Feldhoff yesterday on ABC Radio, is that whilst
#famous, yep.
#radio, that whilst it is a very social activity, you know, we can't play games unless the other person is there. There still is that aspect of, like, you know, having your own space and, you know, still being able to enjoy your hobby in that space, but also being able to share that with, you know, other people. You know,
Painting is almost a form of meditation, and doing hobby is almost a form of meditation for
Yeah,
a
I
lot
completely
of
agree with
people. Myself, I can definitely put my hand up for that, because you take yourself away from. This is why this is a bungalow separate from the house, and there is no work in here. This is darts, if you can see the dartboard behind, darts and painting, and there's even Lego in the cabinet behind, which I'll annoy Brickman about later. It's just, this is getting away from all of the shit in my life that is stressing me out.
yeah.
And I'm just really lucky my wife's very supportive of that. But yeah, it's a really important thing, especially in the last 2 years. I definitely paint a lot more than I used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a really positive thing to just be able to take yourself away and just go do something a bit. Doesn't necessarily have to be super creative sometimes. Like, I love doing that, but also just doing something methodical can be a way of breaking away.
This is really, really interesting, because, you know, we were talking just before, Jacob, about the you know, your YouTube channel, creating videos for the channel essentially as advertising for your products and stuff. I'll come back to the first issue, or the first reason that you mentioned before about the artwork, because that's another super critical thing, I think, for young kids, and I'll talk about my daughter in a second. But there's a couple of comments here in the chat. Brad, who just finished up, said thanks for having me on, having camera issues, etc., etc. And then he goes on to say, when we were chatting before, unpopular opinion, we shouldn't have to monetize our hobbies / what brings us joy. And then if I just jump down a little bit, the Real Disco Boy says, well, that's interesting, Brad, because there is this desire, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So if you can monetize that, then why not? And I do see loads of smaller YouTube channels out there that, you know, have Patreons, and, you know, they're constantly, you know, shouting out to people, you know, subscribe, go support me on Patreon. And, you know, there's a big group of people that, you know, are trying to monetize their hobby, to get some extra money into, you know, support their hobby. But from a mental health perspective, having been on YouTube for, you know, 13 coming on 14 years,
Mental burnout right there.
it can be devastating. And so from your perspective, Jacob, sorry, from your perspective, you've come at this from the perspective of, you know, wanting to grow Conquest Creations as a business. And YouTube just gives you that vehicle to push it out. But do you ever feel that pressure as as a commission painter, as a content creator, as a business owner, that monetizing your hobby, however you've done that, either through a business, YouTube, or sponsorships or whatever, do you feel like you had to do that, or was is that choice, does that come with associated pressure or burdens to have to do something?
I really, really like that question, and the point made about you don't need to monetize your hobby, because my hobby is painting miniatures and playing war games. My monetization of that is editing videos, 3D printing products, shipping out packages. So of all the time I'm spending on my business, maybe a quarter of it is actually relevant to the wargaming hobby. So personally, I'm not the biggest fan of editing videos. And if you want to make a YouTube channel,
you got to edit videos.
You need to do a lot of videos. So like, for example, the most recent battle report that I put out took about 2.5 hours to film and then 8 hours to edit.
Yeah.
So 2.5 hours of me filming, not even playing in it, is not really the hobby anymore. It's doing something related to the hobby, but filming a battle report and editing it isn't playing a game and catching up with mates and painting miniatures. So I think that monetizing the hobby and doing the hobby have very, very little overlap, actually.
Yeah.
So you managed to compartmentalize that quite well, Jacob, to make sure that you don't lose the love for your painting and your playing, which I think is very important, because I just wanted to make a comment that old adage about if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. I don't think that's necessarily true. I've done my hobby as a job. It destroyed the hobby for 5 years for me. I didn't touch a miniature for 5 years until I came back and went, actually, this is a release from my job. And I think it's important that if you're someone like yourself who's having a real crack at this and is very good at what they do, fantastic. But people shouldn't feel the pressure that they have to monetize it and the pressure that they have to succeed from it. It's meant to be about what you want. And that's why I think, people like yourself have done an amazing job, and they help further all this hobby for all of us. But so many of us as well can just relax and enjoy the fact that this is something that is a release from day-to-day pressure.
And I do that a lot. I do that a lot, where I'll paint an army, I'll play games with it with my mates, and there's no thought of the business. There's no thought of, I need to take a photo of this and put it on Instagram, because
I need to sell this, and
JL mentions in the chat, he says, for him, it was a case of making a virtue of necessity for me. It gave me a good buffer when COVID killed my job. And I think that there's so many opportunities for these sorts of cottage businesses to operate these days, with how accessible we are all to each other through so many social media outlets. YouTube has changed a lot, and I'll be talking later on 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. with Elston from Elston Nation. He's one of the old school YouTubers, and I was watching one of his streams the other day, and he said, YouTube's not anymore, it's not about the videos anymore, it's about the editing. Because you can't just film some content and put it up anymore and just expect people to be there watching, because everything is so highly polished that if you do want to put something up there, if you want to be rolling around in that area, you do need to spend, like you said, 8.5 hours editing something. It's a challenge. Darren Holmes mentions here in the chat that painting is great mindfulness for mental health. This is a great hobby, and and that comes back to what I was saying just before about spending that time alone and just reflecting and painting what you enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, for us, like, we have a little club that runs down here out of my garage, and we sometimes describe it as self-help group. That it's basically a bunch of guys, and we push some figures around, but the games don't actually matter. It's actually that social interaction and seeing people have that same sort of thing. So during lockdown, we've done a lot of remote gaming, sort of using cameras and that sort of stuff, just to keep that contact going.
Yeah, well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, Mike. Lisa Amundsen here in the chat, I know I butchered your name, I'm sorry. She says, I think it's fantastic that after all these years, moving around, kids, COVID, it's one of the few things that brings my husband closer to his friends. It's always been a constant.
Yeah, so that's a shout out to Lisa. Lisa was one of the first people that helped me fit in Melbourne. She's the reason I'm playing field hockey, funnily enough. And her husband, Punchy, He's got, that's not his actual name. His actual name's Nick. He's got a collection of second edition Catachan Guard from yonks back, which are fantastic. And he's still slowly but surely chipping away at them. But, you know, as she points out, it's a really good way for him to stay connected. CJ is one of his mates. They're a lovely bunch of guys, and a lot of them, you know, are really struggling during this. So for them, that's a really important thing to keep that contact and that conversation up. So yeah, spot on, Lise, and thanks for the shout out.
Yeah. Yeah, Christian mentions that I have friends from the 80s I still game with on rare occasions, but the local lads and lasses have kept me sane with a wider group of friends of different ages, different games, and the chance to grow.
Yeah, I think that different ages one's a really interesting point, because I'm 21 and don't really, like in outside gaming, don't really meet anyone older than me, but there's quite a few people who I've met, yourself included, Viv, who are older than me in a different stage of my life, who are then, I definitely see as kind of mentors of like, oh, that's, you know, someone who's 10 years older than I am, and someone 20 years older than I am, and that's just knowing more older people as friends, I think is really constructive from my perspective as a young person trying to set up my life successfully.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's really
that.
interesting that you mentioned that, and I hadn't thought about it from that perspective before. But you know, because this whole
you cut out, Viv.
Oh,
we can see you gesticulating wildly, but you've cut out.
Have I cut out?
Something very profound. Oh, here we go.
I think some of it was showboating. I'm not showboating at the end, but it was just play acting.
I was just saying that, you know, because there is such a wide you know, variance in ages of people, and the tabletop gaming is what brings us together, rather than you know, a physical sport where perhaps we might all need to be the same age to participate in that sport or whatever. We get this wonderful cross section of society that we can engage with and, you know, learn from. And as you said, Jacob, you you feel like, you know, for some of these people, you're being mentored by them, or you'll be given life experiences. Which is, you know, just, you know, from a social perspective, you know, is another reason why the hobby is so fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that you can just do with another person, and then, you know, you can meet up with someone to play a game, but while you're playing the game, you just chat about everything else. So it's kind of just a medium to have a relationship with someone else.
Yeah.
The classic thing about guys can't catch up without doing an activity. So
it's so true. So true.
Yeah, and I think that wargaming is the perfect activity. That's funny. I'd never heard that said before, but that is exactly what I needed to.
I only heard it recently, but it's very true, Jacob. Like, you go to the park with my dog and letting the dog walk, and people are having a talk, but I'm happier kicking a footy or throwing a ball for another dog or something than I am just standing there just talking. So it's maybe I've got borderline ADHD as well. Who knows?
Andrew Edison in the chat says, I love losing myself in the painting and not thinking about the world for a while. And, you know, this comes back to your first point that you mentioned, Jacob, about, you know, the hobby being, you know, this pursuit of artistic creation. You know, quite often for me, I really enjoy sitting down with my daughter and just doodling. You know, she's 7. She's painted some miniatures and they're absolutely wonderful.
Hang on, I've got one here, Viv.
You do have one of her.
Viv sold me Napoleonics, and this little fellow was sitting in amongst them, who is obviously not period correct, but still a very dashing uniform. So I'm keeping that.
I think from that perspective of, you know, having this creative outlet, I think everyone should have some sort of artistic or creative outlet to you know, help express themselves. And for young children and for young kids and for young teenagers, that can help, you know, who painting miniatures and playing with them can help break down the barriers to, you know, social interactions with people. That, you know, without that, you know, topic or that, you know, how did you paint that, or, you know, that looks beautiful. You see it all the time online. That, you know, those interactions just wouldn't happen.
Toph, you've got 2 young boys that you've got to learn how to paint and game, all that sort of stuff. How have you, I mean, I've seen them change quite a lot over the years and, you know, really improve in painting and stuff. How have you found that play into their education? Like, it's been quite good, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an artistic thing that they want to do, that they want to learn. I guess it's just all of those things. It's not structured like school. It's something that is interesting to them. I mean, my eldest did a presentation to his class on maths and it was on chance, and he used infinity as an example and did a little demo of
Damn
that.
crits! Sorry.
Yeah, so it's talking about percentages and chance using infinity as a example, and it holds his interest. He hates writing, but he's drafted a little choose your own adventure about ultramarines. So it's just that ability to combine the reading, the maths, the strategy, the bigger picture stuff that kids generally aren't involved in, but suddenly wargaming provides that.
Greybeard's Wargaming mentions here said, what I think is amazing is that there are people around the world who are able to feed their families and expand the hobby for all of us now.
Yep.
And it's really interesting that certainly now during all of this COVID stuff where we're all stuck in our home, we can't see each other. A lot of the interactions that we have with people are either by consuming content that's been, delivered to us, or by participating in, painting hangouts and sessions with our friends and all that sort of stuff.
All hail the algorithm.
Yeah. That because we're so much in tuned to this, interconnected and on-demand world, that this shift in entertainment from just streaming channels, Netflix and all the big ones like that, to this sort of stuff, to live streams, to really professionally edited content on YouTube, having created like this little market, this little niche cottage industry where people can support themselves and their family.
Yeah, I think Duncan Rhodes is a great example of that. Recently had makes his videos painting miniatures and then has expanded into producing products for it, and I think he hit $1 million on Kickstarter a little while ago with his own paint range.
The paint, yeah. And it's actually amazing that someone who was so synonymous with the Games Workshop, Warhammer community videos with all these painting stuff, and he obviously had this massive desire to go and do plenty of other things because there's so many gorgeous figures out there. And I'm really sorry. Like JP convinced me to just shut up and pay the £4 and have a look at the videos. And I actually think I'm going to stay as a subscriber now because the way he presents has always been fantastic. He's always really positive, and there's so much on there. There's so many resources. There's so many different topics, so many different ranges. And that's been really great to see. Like there's more ancient stuff in there that'll probably pull me in at some point eventually as well, as well as your classic big Chad Marines from 40k. So it's been really cool.
Are you interested in anything else outside of MESBG, Jacob? Because that's all the content that I see from you. And we were talking earlier on about the challenges, with there being such an immense amount of games that like a chicken, I'm constantly pecking at little bits on the ground, but never really eating a full meal. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I'm just really, really into Middle-earth strategy battle game. I think it's one of those things where the more invested in something you get, the better it gets.
Yeah, I was just about to say, because it's your one sole thing, you can really understand the minutiae of it.
Exactly.
That gives you a different feeling of reward or a different, feedback to than knowing a whole bunch of different sorts of games.
Yeah, and especially when you play the game competitively at tournaments, and it's like when you do well at a tournament, it's like being super invested feels like it really, really pays off. And I'm into other games, but I don't play any other games. I've got a few 40k armies, playing a Space Marine the other day. I listened to all the 40k lore stuff, but Heart and Soul is definitely Middle-earth. And particularly on my channel, that's my target audience. So if I want to paint a Space Marine, I'll paint a Space Marine. But I don't need to make a video about it because fun.
That's an interesting thing. I'm glad you mentioned that because Ken Murphy here in the chat, earlier up, he was agreeing about monetizing the hobby. As when I worked for Games Workshop, I didn't do anything outside of the job, but in the last 20 years, it's been helping. It's been about helping with my depression. I said before, I find a real struggle to differentiate between my hobby and my business. That being able to sit down and paint a Space Marine because you wanted to paint that Space Marine, or you wanted to try out some different sorts of colors or something. Thank you, sweetheart. Water. Am I sounding hoarse? Am I?
Pace yourself.
Is the answer nay? I'll see myself out.
That being able to enjoy the hobby whilst also being able to earn an income from it, having that balance, I know for me has been challenging.
Yeah, I think something that I've done with that is I've been pretty strict about how I set up my time. So I've got a week off uni coming up, and in that week I'll work on the business stuff, but I'll only work on it from 9 to 5, and then after that I'm not going to do any business related stuff. So after 5 o'clock, if I want to paint miniatures, that's great. I'll paint miniatures because I'm no longer shipping out packages or friggin' sorting products or counting out 12 bases to put into each bag with 12 little soldiers, because that's not the hobby.
Yeah.
That's the business. So yeah, sitting down and painting miniatures,
and that finishes at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's important because I know that this issue and the accessibility or the availability of people to monetize their hobby, specifically on platforms like YouTube and Patreon, can lead to mental health problems because you're constantly chasing views, you're constantly trying to be aware. I can't tell you how many times I hear that YouTube algorithm help me out, really helps. The algorithm.
All hail the algorithm.
All hail our new overlords. That I think that, people run the risk of their hobby being a creative outlet to help them combat anxiety and mental health related issues, to feeling this immense pressure to have to do something. Akhtar Giraffe here in the chat from the Derp guys, big bolt action players down in Tasmania, says, I've been asked to make terrain for sale previously. His terrain skills, his scratch building stuff is absolutely phenomenal. But I've never crossed that line, as it's not something I want to feel like I have to do. And I think where you are, Jacob, with being able to draw that separation between your business and your hobby is super important because,
and really impressive too, by the way. It's not an easy thing to do. So
no, it's not. I'm constantly forever thinking, after I've done something at home, a hobby project or something, I'm like, oh fuck, I should have filmed that. Oh, I could have edited a great video about that. And and then I get in my own head and I'm like, oh, that was fucked. Now I'm not going to be in the algorithm anymore, or people are going to stop watching my stuff, and it's just a downward spiral from there. So I think being able to draw that separation and that distinction is super important. If you're going to think about monetizing your hobby or trying to make money from it.
Yeah, and I think if you want to make a business about your hobby, that's great, but don't try to make your business or your hobby into a business. But if you want a business about your hobby, that's fine, but don't make your hobby into a business. If that makes sense, if you want to make a business, go for it, but it shouldn't take the place of your hobby at all. It should be I think that I can make a lot of money doing this. Cool, I'll do that, but it's completely secondary to the hobby.
Christian in the chat says, I agree with Mike's comments too. When you were talking just before, Mike, he said show and tell at a club night takes more time than the actual playing the game. And that's one of the greatest things that I love about this hobby is just that part of it. Sharing the enthusiasm and the excitement for different genres, for different games with people. And quite often for me, when I'm at the Axes and Ales Club, I very rarely play a game. I'm just there to hang out with people, have a beer, see what people have been painting, what games have been played, and just enjoy that general atmosphere.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of it.
Foggy says, is leaving work and driving home. Thanks for the stream and your focus on mental health. Have a great night, everyone. Well, thanks, Foggy, for tuning in. He's been here for a while. Look, I think it's an important subject. I don't want to get, I know that, I've harassed you quite a bit about it, Jacob. But because, I think that, we're slightly in the same place. We both have small businesses. We both run YouTube channels. We both, have commercialized our hobby in some aspects. And for me, at least anyway, having been a business owner for pretty much most of my life, I've always had this, just this weight, this pressure. And that when the issue of monetization, YouTube channels and stuff came up, it's just an extra burden that I think, can really be quite dangerous for some people.
Yeah, and I definitely went into it thinking that it was going to be a lot easier than it is. And I think probably a lot of people have that where they're like, oh, this will be easy or not as hard as it actually is, and it'll be really successful, and then they end up burning themselves out really quick. Where I had definitely a pretty significant turning point. I'm like, well, I spent like 100 hours on this thing that I made a video about, and it really didn't do very well. And honestly, I didn't really enjoy making that thing very much. So like, what's going on here? I'm happy to spend a lot of time on something if it ends up leading to a lot of money for a business, but like, where's that intersection between what do I actually want to do and what am I actually doing?
Yeah. Jordan Cole, just coming back, he says, reminds me of when I was 16 years old kid and mum was concerned about all these adult men I was spending my free time with. Jordan.
Do you like gladiator films? Okay, no, I'll stop. Sorry.
Jordan used to come to the old battle bunker once, and I don't know how old he was at the time, but Jordan, stayed there. We used to have, the business was open, then afterwards, we'd hang out and, play games and paint or whatever. Jordan actually stayed there until, super late in the evening, missed the last bus, and actually slept in the shop stretched out between two chairs.
That's great.
While I was building some terrain all night with another one of my friends, a Canadian guy, Adam Rogers. He runs a Greenleaf Terrain up in Canada. He was down in Australia. He spent the whole night. We were making terrain the whole night. And Jordan and one of his friends slept on the floor and stretched out between two couches in my shop. So,
legend. That's great.
Take from that what you will, either hardcore hobbyist or, potential, traumatic experiences for children. I'm not sure.
One of my favorite.
¿Por qué no los dos?
Sorry.
I'm just saying, as in, why not both? ¿Por qué no los dos?
Yeah. One of my favorite hardcore hobby experiences was flying up to Brisbane for a tournament, and at the airport, a group of us met at the airport, and someone was sitting there in the airport with their paints out, trying to finish their army before the tournament started.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, we've done that. We've had group painting sessions at CanCon the night before, with 8 of us sitting around finishing off one guy's army.
Yeah,
we even got to the point where we got a minibus one year. We actually were painted in the bus on the way.
In the bus.
Legend.
I have a photo.
There were many canned convoys of us doing army lists on the way up, and I had all the paints laid out on the dining table as everyone was drinking the first night.
Yeah.
Good times. Wouldn't recommend it anymore.
There was one tournament I was at where the best painted vote was after round 2. So one guy managed to finish round 1 early so that he could go off and finish painting his army.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, amazing. These are all the wonderful little things that I love.
Silly
about.
Stories that make it.
Yeah. Just a wonderful experience.
Well, my favourite CanCon story is a mate of mine, Marcus Phillips. We used to play in the Flames of War, and he took this list one year. He had like 11 pack 36s, which hopeless.
That's a lot.
Right, yeah, and a lot, and not much value. So anyway, he had a terrible, he lost every game. And he tells this story about driving home to Melbourne, and then every 5 or 6 Ks he'd chuck one of his dice out the window.
Classic post CanCon.
Yep.
I think I rocked up. So Infinity is a skirmish game where you want sort of mainly, I guess, a bunch of troops running around on foot, doing their thing, being all sneaky. And I decided to rock up with the most number of motorbikes I could take in a list. And it just, the first 2 games it wasn't working, so I decided, you know what, on the 3rd game, I'm just going to deploy them in a flying V. Full Mighty Duck style. All 6 of them in a wedge with a massive giant robot, also known as tags for the Infinity players behind it. And I came up against a really fun, lovely opponent who just didn't quite have a great grasp on the rules yet because he was only just starting out, and managed to win by starting off in this ridiculous wedge formation, which just, if anyone's played Infinity, it should not have worked. So that was a pretty great way to scream flying V at the top of my voice and chant, quack, quack, quack. But yeah, some of the younger people didn't quite get that one, but Mighty Duck is great.
Well,
and
I was
you should
just
go watch it.
I was just about to say that Jacob probably doesn't know what Mighty Duck is.
There's a series now. You might know the new one.
Oh no, it's not.
I think I know what it is. I
Yeah.
feel like it's a hockey thing. Is it related to hockey?
It's an ice hockey movie.
Yeah, it's an ice
There
hockey.
we go. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of those motivational, team movies where the team comes
Feel good
team
films.
comes together
Yeah.
and then they fucking win the whole season
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
On
against
that
adversity.
the same aspect of what you were talking about, of going into Flying V and going in, because I play Middle Earth, so obviously, there's characters that you can play, like Boromir, who obviously he dies in the movie.
Yeah, he
So-
sure does.
If your Boromir gets shot to death by the enemy, you didn't play badly. You were just being true
You
to
were
the
being
story.
thematic.
Yeah, you
'Cause
were
that's what happened.
on point. And
You would have
following
You would have
the
loved
canon.
this one, Jacob. Back in the day when I worked at GW with Nick and I actually ended up working at Games Workshop together in
Oh,
Brisbane
yeah.
City. And they just brought out the Mines of Moria box. So we were doing a big thing about lots of promotional games and that sort of thing to rope the kids in. And what we did was we had the mines set up where, as per the book, you just had like some blocks of, XPS foam that we dry brush grey. Every single game, without fail, Pippin would die.
Yep.
It would always happen. Like he'd fall down a hole because you have to jump over some bits, or he'd get killed by some goblins or whatever. And there was this one game where he finally got to the end. They actually didn't lose any of the characters. The poor person playing the goblins, which I think was actually me, Nick. They just didn't kill any of them. They got to the end, and we went, right, you young fella, this 10-year-old kid, I want you to roll this die. If you roll a 1, Pippin suffers an aneurysm and dies. And the kid rolled a 1, and we've got these, this group of 10 and 12-year-olds all screaming, Pippin had an aneurysm, and the parents had no idea what was going on. But we sold a lot of boxes that day. It's just silly moments like that in games that just make it. Like that happened, as I said, probably 11 years ago now. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. Lord of the Rings is fun like that though.
Yeah, it's such a fun game. I feel like it gets overshadowed a bit. But I don't know, maybe I'm just really into it. But I'm like, why the hell would anyone do anything except for this game? It's so cool.
I think it's one of those things where it's almost fitting into almost like the specialist games now for GW. It's not, yes, it's got its own part of the website. Yes, it still gets a lot of support, but it's not as pushed anywhere as much, obviously, as 40K and Age of Sigmar. But, as you're a perfect example of it, the community's fantastic. And that's why I think the game is so good, is not just because they've got a great rule set and a bunch of beautiful miniatures, but the people that play it just want to have fun.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is
It's big fun.
it got obviously the new edition came out, but I feel like there's so many players in the Middle Earth community that have been playing Middle Earth specifically for 10, 15 years. So it's very, very dedicated.
They grew up with it.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of us grew up with it, so. But I think the other great thing was they made a really smart decision in not trying to reinvent the wheel when they did the rule upgrade. It was actually just fixing a lot of the stuff. Because didn't they get 2 massive fans to come in and basically?
So the best thing about it is the rules writer, Jay Clare. I'm not sure if I think he got hired because he won so many tournaments, and now so he's the rules writer, and he recently won the world championship as well. And
now he's just cheating,
Yeah,
the book's open for everyone. So he is just the perfect person to be writing the rules, because who better to write the rules than the best player in the world?
Right, and they're the ones who are going to make sure it's still a great system without being too over the top, and they'll make sure it's balanced because they're always looking for the way to break the game.
And pretty much all of the rules that have come out recently have been absolutely spot on. Like the change with the new edition, it was a very, very minor change. They just added more cool stuff. In the game, you can do whatever you want, and I think that's why I like it so much, because it really feels like this is what Aragon would do. Like, he doesn't go in and kill 10 goblins in one turn. He fights 2 guys each turn. He kills 1 or 2 of them, and it just feels like it's really that's how it would happen in my head.
I've noticed that, and I've found that Theoden always has his horse shot from out from under him, which I feel also seems somewhat thematic considering Return of the King.
Exactly.
Nick's not there at the moment, but he did it, and then someone else did it the week before. But they definitely have done a really good job of emphasizing. It's amazing how just 3 simple, fate, might, and will can actually change how a character performs and exemplify what they are in the books.
Yeah.
So you're dead right. It's really cool how they've balanced that. And
they've done a great job of, giving characters little cool rules that resemble what they did in the films. So, like, a good example of just a super minor character, there's that orc that tries to kill Merry and Pippin when the Uruk-hai are there. His name's Grishnak. And he has a little rule that makes him better at...
Is that when they're crawling away on the ground into
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. So that orc, he gets a little special rule that if he's fighting a trapped opponent, so someone who's either knocked on the ground or surrounded, that he gets a bonus to attack against them, which is just like, that's exactly what he did in the film.
Exactly what he did. Yeah.
Perfect. Makes sense that he has that rule. And that's one example of every single character has that.
Yeah.
It helps keep the game, thematically on point. It's strange to me. I've always loved the Middle Earth rule set, the rules itself. I read them a long time ago. I only played a little bit, back in the day. But you were saying just before, Jacob, that why aren't more people playing this game? And it's such a great game, and it is. It's one of those things that is super weird. That the game is so great that maybe it's just the whole Tolkien world or Lord of the Rings that is a limiting factor for it, because in my opinion it is the best rule set that Games Workshop has. And
controversial.
How controversial? You heard it here first, folks.
I mean, I agree, but
yeah. Well, and it's strange that it doesn't have more of a following. So, but yeah,
I think
it's almost ironic that it feels like if it was not a GW game, maybe it'd be
bigger,
more popular than it is. I think because it plays third fiddle to, Age of Sigmar and 40k, and even a lot of the specialist games get more focused on it.
Adeptus Titanicus has had more releases than Lord of the Rings over the past 3 years.
So we've had quite a lot the past 3 years. Maybe I don't know how much Adeptus Titanicus have, but we're getting new stuff all the time.
Yeah. It's great to see that things are still happening for it, but that is actually a really interesting, idea or concept. What happens if if Games Workshop didn't have the IP, the same game, the same miniatures, the same quality of things, but just it was run by somebody else? Would it, would it be different given that it's not playing, third fiddle? I don't know. Interesting concept.
Yeah, there was a time where it kind of looked like it wasn't going to get anything new. And honestly, that was totally fine because the game still existed and we still had tournaments and we still played heaps. And then it did get new stuff, and that's awesome. We got the edition update. But even when maybe hope was dying for new releases, the community was still really strong because the game's still the same. It doesn't matter if it's getting new releases or not. The game's perfect how it is, or maybe not perfect, but it's great how it is.
It's functional and usable how it is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I hear constantly about the game is that it's really well balanced. And that you can throw something against anything else, and as long as your tactics and strategies are working for the army you've chosen, you run a good chance. And versus the constant thing that you always see in 40k and stuff is that this faction has the most up to date codex, or they've got this new release that makes my army inferior, etc.
They do have a little bit of power creep, unfortunately, but I think that really comes down to who you play as well.
I don't think it's as much in Middle Earth as people say it is. A lot of people say, like, oh, the Hobbit armies are so much more powerful. And I think that given, like, if you look at Australian tournament results, it's not true at all. Pretty much Lord of the Rings armies have won all the tournaments except for the Hobbit armies that people thought were the weakest ones, because really good players want to win with challenge. So they play weak factions, and then they still do really well because it's really skill reliant.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The game's not based around the units in the faction books. It comes from the players who are playing it themselves. I just noticed here that Elston Nation is in the chat, or he was earlier on. I'll be having a chat with Elston much later on tonight. As I said before, Elston's an old school YouTuber. He said, "I love having friends that bring me back down to earth. Whenever I've gone too far down the YouTube rabbit hole, my real life friends will bring me back to the real world." Here just touching on that topic we were discussing earlier about monetizing your hobby and the pressure and the burden that you feel. From that perspective. Mark Newman says, "Sorry, gents, Blood Bowl is the best rule set that GW has released.
It's pretty good.
But
it's pretty good.
If someone else owned the IP, would it be better again?" Yeah,
I haven't played Blood Bowl yet.
Wouldn't be Blood Bowl if it wasn't GW. That's the problem.
It's
Blood
one of
Bowl
the
is the best rule set for sadomasochists.
It's one of the few other games I want to play.
How do elves stand up to halflings, Toph? Let's not talk about it. Okay.
Let's never talk about that ever again.
you haven't played Blood Bowl yet, Jacob?
No, I actually made a table for it because I just wanted to. So I've got a table, has little dugouts, has a scoreboard. Haven't played the game,
Nice.
but
I like it.
Yeah, I absolutely love the idea of it. If it's a sports game, so your team rocks up. Because with a lot of games, like, why are my elves fighting the men? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
but with the sports game, it always makes sense.
Yeah, what's the context? Yeah, it is a wonderful game, and it's been relatively stable and consistent. Obviously, being one of their specialist games that hasn't had massive numbers of rule updates and stuff. Obviously, there was the new set that came out. Geez, I'm going to say earlier this year, but it was probably the year before last. To re-release it, but yeah, it's a wonderful game. It's a wonderful game.
I think what's great about Blood Bowl, though, I think ultimately, and this is, you could almost say it's the same with games like Epic or any of the old specialist games, is the communities that have maintained them and kept them alive. Because you think about Blood Bowl, I think it was nearly a decade that the game was maintained and kept alive purely through the force of will of the community.
Yeah.
Well, Games Workshop gave it no love, like discontinued the ranges, stopped selling the products, pretty much, packed up shop and left the field. And while they've yeah, there you go, thanks. Puns all after me. While they've retaken the pitch, so to speak.
Oh, come on!
What you've seen is not so much a gravitation back towards Games Workshop as the sole purveyor of fantasy football. Because you look at Grebo Games or any of the other major fantasy football ranges, they still have a very strong presence. And we were talking about Western Australia earlier. So the Waffle over in Western Australia, the big fantasy football Blood Bowl league over there, is huge. And it's not because of Games Workshop, it's in spite of it. And I think the interesting thing about what you guys have been talking about with Lord of the Rings is there's a large community of Lord of the Rings players who don't play SBG, who use Dragon Rampant or even use a version of the Two Fat Lardies rules, Dux Ballora. I think it's Dux Ballorum or the other. I can't remember the exact name. Mike, you can probably correct me.
Dux Britannium.
Dux Britannium, that's it. Yep. And so I think one of the things is about SPG is it sits within a broader community of Lord of the Rings gaming.
Yeah, I
think
right?
So.
It's a segment of a really large community of people who really love the lore, love the period, but don't necessarily play Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I guess that's a really interesting point, because I do float around in that group as well. Is that there are other Middle Earth communities playing different versions of the game, or playing using different rule sets for their version of the game.
I think I'm so deep in that I've just somehow never come across that, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, there's a wonderful group on Facebook and I can't remember. Mike, you probably know the name of it. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but yeah, there's some wonderful figures in there. They're mostly concentrating on non-Games Workshop related aspects of Middle Earth, and it's a wonderful group. Some of the stuff that you see in there is amazing. It's wonderful. All right, I'm going to let Lockie in.
Oh no! Talk about monetizing your Middle Earth hobby.
Yeah. Here's a man, that takes it to extremes.